And welcome. I am the database guy. Welcome back. I'm glad you joined me. We're going to go into our presentation here. We're at video 8, so we're moving right along in our, and this is, we're still in VBA. We're still in sort of basic. We've covered a lot of things here. We covered all of what you see here, right? And then, of course, we left off with, and we finished with go-to, go-sub. We're going to look at arrays and collections, and you sort of saw collections a while back, a few videos before, and there was an example of a collection. What is the difference between an array and a collection? Well, an array, you can specify values that are to be included into the array. You can do it one of two ways. You can specify the dimension of the array, as well as what specific variables you want to add to it, but you don't have methods on an array. You have methods on a collection, which makes it a very nice, neat little thing here. So let us look here at our first example array. We're going to type in 1. And here, so let's see what it's doing here. We're implicitly declaring an array as a variant. Now, let's talk about that for a minute. We could declare an array as anything we want. As you see in our next example, it's going to be a long integer. But here is a variant. There's a reason why. We're adding all this data to the array immediately. Okay? And we're looking then to debug print what's the lower bound. And it's the lower bound, not value, but the lower bound number or in the array, and the upper bound number in the array. So if I were to add 7, 9, and I were to run this again, so the fifth number is the upper bound, the first number is the lower bound. And by the way, there's a little thing here called option base 1. I'm going to change it to 0 just for kicks over here. And you'll notice what happens. It starts at 0, my array, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so 0 to 4 is 5. So when I'm dealing with an array in this kind of case here, where it's a variant and I need to set my numbering, all right, I will set it to what option base I need for when I want to begin the array. Now, while we're on the subject here, what if I wanted to print out the actual value? So we're going to do a comma here, and we're going to go array, which is really what we're going to do. We're going to put in the bound number and let it go. And hold on a minute. Oh, I see what happened. Put a comma in there, not, yeah, all right. So I'm going to do the same thing here with a comma. But here we're going to do our upper bound, U-bound. And so what this coding tells you is, whenever you want to look for an array, you want to look at what is the index of that array. So we have the lower bound and the upper bound. We're going to debug compile to make sure there's no errors, and indeed there are not. And when we do that, we find now the upper bound is the first value, which happens to be 2, and the lower bound, the lower bound is the first value, which happens to be 2, and the upper bound is the fifth value, which happens to be 9. So when we want to print an array or the values or get the values from an array, it's array and the index number. If I had put in an index number for some reason, let's just see here, and we'll do it this way so you can be convinced that it's not a trick. Array, and we'll go with the third index value on that one. And there we see it. 5 is the third one, right dead center in the middle. Okay. So this is interesting. This is how we use an array. And what you would have to know is, with an array, is if I'm looking for a particular value, I'd have to be able to pick up that value. And so I have to know its index, right? In this case here, the upper and lower bounds are are themselves indices. And as we saw, 1 and 3. So, well, this case is 1 and we're going to put a 5 in there. Hello. There we go. So running this again just one more time gives us exactly what we expect to see. And let's see. This 5 here, by the way, is the number of the upper bound, the fifth value. This 5 here is the value of the third item in the array. And that's how we refer to things in arrays. Let's go to the second example here. This one's interesting. All right. We get to see another function here, another capability, but it's a function that is not tied to the methodology directly of an array. So we run this, and let's look at the code. So we implicitly declare our array from 0 to 2 is long, and we put in each value we want for 0, 1, and 2, and we're starting at 0. So it's actually 3, and you got to be careful there. If I implicitly declare from 0 to 2 as my array, I'm actually saying I want 3 values in my array. If I were to do 1 to 4, it's 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So that would be 4 values. If I did 0 to 4, that would be 5, 0 to 3, that would be 4, and so on. And then we have, after we add the values, we print the array at 0, which is 1. And then we erase the array. We completely erase it. And then we try to print the array value at 0 once again, and we get 0 because nothing's there. So this shows us how we can erase an array. We didn't do that up here. We didn't care to do it. But by erasing the array, we can get rid of the data that is in there. All right. Let's look at example 3 here. Now this one is really involved because this one here, and I'm going to show you what it's doing here. We implicitly declare an array, and we have two dimensions to it, 0 to 2. So there's 3 in one dimension and 3 in the next dimension. So 3 by 3, 9. We should have 9 total. We start with I, and we declare implicitly I as long, j as long, and k as long. Now, these could have been placed at the end here with commas. Didn't have to do it this way. For the sake of ease, just to show you, it is done that way. And then for I equals L bound, lower bound of the array, to the upper bound, right? And it may be interesting to know why we have ARR comma 1 and ARR comma 1. What we're saying is I right now is 0. So I'm going from 0, 1 to 0, 1. All right. And then what I'm doing is now j is also 0. I'm going from 0, 2 to 0, 2. And so array 0 in this case, well, in this case, it's going to be 0. We're starting at 0 for j. So 0, 0 equals k. And k equals k plus 1, and there's my 1, right? So I go to my next j, and k will now be 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, and so on until I arrive at 9, all 9 coming through here. All right. And then when I print these out, what I'm actually saying is at the 0, 0 location, I have 0. At the 0, 1, I have 1. At the 0, 2, I have 2. At the 1, 0, I have 3. At the 1, 1, I got 4. The 1, 2, I have 5, and so on. And I should see this. So when you have a two-dimensional array, you have to iterate through both one dimension and the other dimension to get that information. I wanted to show it to you. It's involved, but it's it's something I've worked with and I've done with this as well. And so if you ever needed to do this, now the reason I wanted to show you another thing too. What would happen if I put k equals k plus 2 here? Let's see. You can see I start now at 2. Then 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, and all the way up to 18, where I end. And then when I'm in the array here now, okay, 0, 0 now becomes 0, but 0, 1 becomes 2. So my first k value is going to be 2 for a 0, 1, right? And for a 0, 2, it's going to be 4, because 2 plus 2 is 4, right? And so on. And so this value here for k determines your increment. If I did 3, let's see here, I'm going to start at 3 probably and work my way up, and I do. As you can see. Now, your question might be, why am I seeing this here? Because what happens is the last thing it prints, and this is what we saw with the collection, even when it gets past that last value, oh, it should be 9, should be my last value, should be 9. I have a 9 in the array. So at that point, I'm going to have 24 plus 3 is 27. But you say, wait a minute, 27 is not in my array. It is not. You're starting at 0, so that is why. So 0, 3, 6, so you're going to go 1 less than what you see here. Let's show you that for the 1, just to close this out. So I'm not, and so you see here, I'm going up to 9, but 8 is the last item in the array, okay? And that's what you should see here. So arrays are interesting, but collections are far better, all right? So we'll look at the collection example. And this one you saw. You saw this one before. It did. And what you saw, gotta be careful here. Let's reset this. You saw it looking like something like this. All right, and I'm gonna run it again, and it's fine. Now, I changed something that was here. Remember I said that this LNGY here, or whatever when it comes to the last value, which is going to be 7, it's going to set this to 1 plus 7 or 8. So LNGY can be here as 8. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go comma LNG X comma LNGY. I want to see all my data, all my all right. You can see here on the X, I'm 1 to 8. And I should be, because X here should be 1 to 8, at least in the loop. If I come outside the loop here, I will probably get NGX. I'll probably get an LNGX of 9. So, and I in fact do, and you see it right there. But within the loop, I'm 1 to 8. So when you finish this loop and you hit next, it's going to kick it over from 0 to 7 to now 8, and that's why we can use this for the 8. Now on here, we see that LNGY is always 8. It never changes. So with a collection, by the way, we add. And as you can see here, we have the add method. And we went through this before. You have various methods. So we had the add. Yeah, I know, I'm goofing it. And we had the add method. And then we're going to add to it string item, right? So you can have an add method. You can have a remove method, right? And let's look at the various types of methods as we, let's see, COLLALL. So you could have add, count, which we have one of them running the count method, right? Debug collection count, giving us a count of 8. We don't have any in there. Item, right here, printing each item, right? And remove, well, remove, you can remove an item, but you want to be careful. When you remove an item from a collection, one of the things you are faced with, especially in a loop, is you now are, how shall I say it, less one item. So in other words, if I'm going from 1 to 8, and I remove an item, I'm gonna error out at some point. So get rid of that. So to try to do that, so if I did this, debug, I'm sorry, no, COLL remove, and I said the third item, I'm probably going to error out here because it's probably going to be a not C. It's going to miss an index. And I do. Subscript is out of range. So debugging this here now, I'm missing the fifth one, right? So I'm missing it. And what's happening is I can't do that in a loop. What I can do when I'm not within a loop is use this remove if I want. But by removing it in a loop, I'm now setting the number of items I have within the loop. So what I would do would be, I might run through that loop, that for loop, find the item in the collection that I am interested in deleting, maybe use a find first if I'm going to, or something that I'm going to locate it with, delete it, and then finish my work. Once I delete it, once I find it, that's it. I exit my function. So I get rid of the item in question. And I will check it before I run the delete because I'll use the collection count. And if it's 0, I won't do anything because I have nothing to delete, right? If it is greater than 0, I can delete something. And that's the other portion of scope too. I can't, you got to be careful when you're looking at what you're going to manipulate. I can always add things without any issue, but I have to check to make sure I don't already have it present. That's one. I can edit something and also check to make sure the item isn't duplication or present. And deleting, I got to make sure I can delete. There's something to delete. If I have 0 records, there's nothing to delete. I'm going to get an error. There's going to be no question about that. So let me give you an example of that one. Okay. Let's do the 9th item in the collection. One, it doesn't exist. You know it doesn't exist. See what it does. And we go to debug, and of course we don't have a 9th item to delete, and that's my point. So stop it right here. So you can't delete what you don't have, right? So collections, so when do you use a collection versus an array? Well, an array you can use for sort of filling things temporarily and retrieving them, but a collection is much better. These 4 methods in the collection object allow you to be able to locate, add, really manipulate the collection. One of my uses of it is if I am going to look at data, and I've done this for a client. So what I would do would be I would look to see if there are, when during an import of data, if there's any, let's say, new clients in the list. And what I would do is if I find those clients, I'll add them to a collection. And I'll have my list of my new clients. And when I go back into that collection, I will then open it up and I will save it to a temporary table, which then becomes the basis of me opening up a form because the form has the record source as the temporary table as the record source. So in other words, what I'm doing is I'm taking data from one area and I'm pumping it into another area. It's much easier to do that than to have somebody go through each and every single new client that they're going to see or a new person that they're going to import. So now in the form, they'll have a whole list of who is new and they'll decide what they're going to do with that. And that's really how this kind of works out. Now, an array, could I do it with an array? Yeah, I possibly could, but the challenge with the array is, and as you saw above in our code, that I would have to declare each value here versus I can use the add for collection, which is the easiest way to do it. If I come up to something new, I'm going to add it to my collection and I'm going to keep going until, we keep looping through it. For every new thing I find, I will simply add it. That makes much more sense, having to specify an index as to where I want something. So the array, you need an index to specify where you want to put something. With a collection, you don't. You simply add it. On the other hand, both of them, to pull them out, you will need the index, and one is called the collection item index. We saw that down here, right? So right here, and the array is the same way. So to me, your collection is a much more flexible tool to use. Can collections be multidimensional? Um, that's where the answer is I have never used a multidimensional collection, and you would have to specify it in two ways. So what I would say, if you're going to do that with a collection, and you could, I think you could do it, I haven't done it, is you would have to set up two collections and save the data parallel. So you would have one set in collection 1 and the other in collection 2. And when you retrieve it, you go along that way and do it that way. So I have a first name and a last name, for example. I could have the first name in collection 1 and the last name in collection 2, but I've got to keep them aligned properly. So I match them. The array is much better for that. As you saw over here, I can specify more than one uh, dimension to it. And then I have to set the data I'm going to put in for each of those. So it's a little bit complicated. We won't see any of this most likely until we get to intermediate at a minimum. I would use the collections and I'll show you how to use that because I think it's a better one to work with. And again, it's rare to see multiple dimensional arrays or collections in MS Access. So to really kind of wind down here on this, we're basically on arrays collections, and there's a couple of more things I want to go through before I move on, maybe one or maybe two videos at most, before we get into the intermediate level of programming. And that's going to start really with your first crack at getting data out of tables or actually parsing data in tables, I should say, and seeing that data and understanding how that works, because it's going to be critical to be maximizing your capabilities with VBA and with Microsoft Access. So, as always, please like and subscribe. These are coming to you absolutely free. And see if there's anything I haven't covered here. I want to make sure. I think we're good. So I will post, again, this database will be posted to my Facebook page where you can see it. And I will keep updating it as I do that each day, because we're going to be adding more and more content to this. And we have still not, by the way, connected this one yet, which is the first one we're going to connect to what happens here. And we'll do that probably in the intermediate programming because I don't want to do it in basic. So in any event, wherever you are, have a great day, evening, morning. Have a great life, and I will see you soon.